Hello everybody, Mike Westfall here with McDonald Garden Center. Today on our free live webinar, we'll be talking about our top 5 veggies to plant for the fall season. So if you've never planted a vegetable garden in the fall, it is one of the best times to plant a vegetable garden. It is the first vegetable garden that I ever planted was in the fall. And that's because of a story that I'll tell you here in a minute, but it is a really easy thing to do. You can do them from seed, you can do them from transplants. I'll show you all of the different kind of tips and tricks throughout this webinar. Feel free to make comments, ask questions throughout this. Let us know where you're watching from. Sharon, hello from Chesapeake. So let us know where you're watching from, ask questions throughout this, and I'll make sure to get to your questions as soon as I possibly can. I'll try and do it as I go through the webinar, but if I miss something, I'll get to it at the end. So whenever we kind of come out of the summer season, if you've grown a summer vegetable garden where you're talking about squash and tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and all of those great plants, as you get into the fall season, you might start to see them deteriorate a little bit. It's been a long, hot summer. They've put a lot of effort into producing all of these great fruits for your labor. But we also are probably thinking, what can I do next? Well, here in the Hampton Roads area, and really in a lot of zones, I mean, really zones 7 to 9, maybe a little bit of 6, you really can grow a great fall vegetable crop, and even into early spring, and some of them that'll last throughout the season, and we'll talk about that as we go through. But it is one of the most successful ways to grow edible plants. They're super easy. So we'll talk a little bit about planning. We do want to plan. So I'll say hello to Caroline in Portsmouth. Thanks for watching. We do always want to do a little bit of planning. Caroline said, what zone are we in? We're in a weird area. So I mentioned zones. We're in the Virginia Beach area, or the south side of Virginia Beach, or even just overall Hampton Roads. We're kind of in the middle of a 7B to an 8A. So typically I kind of group everybody into the 8A. When you get up into the Williamsburg area, a little bit more, west of Virginia, you get into the 7B zone, but we're really typically an 8A, which means typically our frost date is going to be about November 15th. That's really what's kind of important to know about our hardiness zones. But we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. So spend a little bit of time planning. I always talk about this, especially in a vegetable garden. It's important when you do anything in the garden to take a minute, plan what you want to do. Come in, you can be a weekend warrior, and we can take care of everything that you might need in the weekend, or plan out how you're going to process this and kind of work through it throughout the season, because some of these I'll talk about a little bit about how you can kind of do a little bit of succession planning, which means you can plant for different harvest times. We'll talk about that a little bit. But plan out your garden. And really what I mean here is do a little drawing. It really helps you to just do an overhead drawing. It doesn't have to be anything as nice and pretty as this drawing up here. It just needs to be kind of a basic drawing of your vegetable garden, or where you're planting your vegetables, and kind of label where you're going to plant things. So if you're going to plant spinach in one area, or kohlrabi in another area, or carrots or turnips or beets or whatever, all of these fall vegetables that we'll talk about today, plan out where they're going to go, because sometimes in the future, we're not going to plant these again probably until next fall. So it's good to have a kind of overhead diagram of where you planted things, or at least make a list and have some descriptions. It just really will go a long way in the future when you go to plant again. You'll kind of know what you did, and it'll be a nice little refresher course as you go into the next year of planting. Now, I mentioned the reason that I got into the fall vegetable garden is because the owner, or the previous owner, before his son took over, Eddie Anderson, told me about a story about the colonial times, the Colonial Garden. So, of course, the settlers landed here, right here in the Hampton Roads area, and really endured some very tough times early on. So for the first couple years, they weren't growing a lot of tomatoes and cucumbers and different things like that. They really survived on what we call cold crops, C-O-L-E. Now you can call them cold crops. A lot of people do call them cold crops because they grow in cooler temperatures. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about a fall vegetable garden, is these cold crops, or these cooler temperature vegetables that love this cool weather. And they are heavy producers, they're very easy to grow, and there's a very high success rate. And that is what I learned, if we can learn anything from the history, of course, them landing, the settlers landing in Jamestown, and this is what they survived on, is turnips and beets and carrots and all of these different things. were really one of the most successful ways that they gardened way back in the 1700s. So let's take a little bit of information from that and kind of say, okay, if they were very successful with it during those very, very difficult times, then it must be something that we've improved upon, hopefully, and it must be something very easy to grow. So I think it's a great story, and it's very near and dear to our hearts here in the Hampton Roads area, but it helps kind of explain that in the history, this was something that helped the settlers survive during those first couple years. So it's a great kind of little story there that really kind of got me into this fall vegetable garden, because I was kind of, a little bit worried about starting a vegetable garden. I was really into my landscape, my trees and my shrubs and all those different things. But I had carved out some space for a vegetable garden, and I really wanted to get into it, and that's what started it. And so for the first time, I did a fall vegetable garden. And these are some of the plants that I planted. I maybe didn't plant them all in the first year. Usually the first year you do it, you kind of go a little overboard, as we typically always do. I know the first summer vegetable crop I did, I planted probably 10 tomatoes. A family of 4 does not need 10 tomatoes. And so you kind of learn your lessons as you go. Gardening is all about learning, and learning from your mistakes and learning from your successes. And so that's what we're going to kind of try and help you do, is be more successful. And that's why I love this fall vegetable garden. So we'll get started on my top 5 list. And in these top 5s, I'll be throwing in a couple different little tips and tricks and some products and different things that you might consider trying. So my number 5 is broccoli. Broccoli, an amazing vegetable, super, super healthy, very, very easy to grow. It does take a little bit more time to grow. So typically, broccoli is going to, seed, if you're starting from seed, I've got some broccoli seeds I'm going to show you here, and I'll tell you why I love seed packets, is because they tell you all the information on the seed packet, but they typically are going to germinate somewhere around the 7 to 10 day time frame, but they do mature in about a 2 to 2.5 month time frame. But that just means you got to start a little bit earlier, or they make a great early spring crop as well. So broccoli are one of the easier ones to try if you're starting earlier. So I see Sharon asked the question, I would have never thought broccoli would be easy to grow. Well, it actually is pretty easy to grow. It's all about timing with broccoli. I wanted to throw it in there because it's one of my favorites. And so it's pretty easy to grow, especially when you talk about some of the smaller varieties. And it's a very important thing to know that you got to start them a little bit earlier. So here in the Hampton Roads area, we typically recommend starting in early part of September, maybe even late August, to get your seeds in the ground so that you can get a harvest done. Now, you could probably even still get away with it. The first time that I ever did broccoli, this is why I loved it, was because I planted a little bit late. I got in the ground a little bit late, but it overwintered. We had a fairly mild winter. The plant did fairly well in the winter, and then I got an early spring crop of broccoli. So really, really nice. It's also good with broccoli to understand to space out or stagger your planting times or your seeding times so that you get different harvests. But a really cool trick is with broccoli is after you take off that main head, leave the plant, because you'll get a bunch of little side shoots that'll produce smaller heads of broccoli. And so it's a really, really great one to grow. Let's see, I see some questions. So Sharon said, can it be planted in a planter? Yes, broccoli can. You won't be able to grow as much. Broccoli does need some spacing. But then Angel asked, are the bugs as fierce on the broccoli planting in the fall? Yes. But the reason that I love fall planting for the bug purpose is the plants are small. So if we can control the bug issue early, and I'll talk about this as we go on. So hang with me, Angel. I'll show you some specific products. Mainly it's the cabbage moss that we're dealing with. But if you plant them early, the cabbage moss can be a problem. But if we attack it early and we control it earlier, as those plants mature, the bug issue tends to go away because we're getting into a cooler time frame. The spring's a little bit trickier. The spring's the reverse, right? So in the spring, you plant early, you don't have as many problems, but as they mature, the problems can get worse and can compound very quickly. So I like the fall better, but I also like the opportunity to grow them in the spring. And you're gonna hear me say that a lot throughout this, is that some of these plants are gonna make it all the way through the winter and produce for you in the spring as well. But broccoli is a great one. The most important thing that I think I can tell you about broccoli is pick that broccoli head right there when it's nice and tight. Because if you let it open up too much, it's going to start flowering. Broccoli is basically the bud of their flower. So as they start to form that bud, that's what we eat. But if it opens up, it turns into like some of those yellow flowers over there that you can see in that far picture. And then they're not going to be as edible. So definitely pick them early, but save your plant, just cut off the top and get some of those side shoots as well. So broccoli is an awesome one. And there's nothing sweeter than broccoli after a light frost. As I mentioned, our frost date is typically around November 15th in this area. So around November 15th, November 20th, maybe some years November 10th. After a light frost, your broccoli is super, super sweet. So if you can get that timing right, then you'll have an amazing broccoli to grow. So really, really awesome. The one thing that I do want to show you, so I'm going to show you a couple things after each one. I'll show you, of course, seeds. I do have some broccoli starter plants. So you can always get starter plants. Starter plants typically are going to be a 4-cell. So you got 4 little plants in here and you can plant these. That kind of diverts the process of planting from seed. But I love seed. I'm not going to go super in depth into how to plant seeds and how to germinate seeds. I've done webinars on them in the past, so you can go back and check those out on our YouTube channel. But broccoli or seeds in general have all the information that you need right on the back of the packet. That's why I love to talk about seeds, is because a lot of people are a little worried about it, but they're actually pretty easy. So we'll take this one. This is Waltham 29 broccoli, a very common type of broccoli. And then right on the back, it'll tell you sprouts in 5 to 10 days, matures in 75 days. So it's kind of an easy one. It also needs about 18 inches of space. So I know you mentioned, someone mentioned planting in a container. Yeah, in a container you can plant them, but you're only going to probably get 1 or 2 in a container. But you can underplant it with some of these other things that I'll talk about later. So you can create a lot of this fall crops you can grow in containers, raised beds, rows. You can do a lot of different types of things with them. That's all in that planting stage. But easy to kind of know how long it's going to take to germinate them, and then of course how long it's going to take them to mature. And all of them are slightly different. So let's see, this one is 5 to 10 days, but matures in 60 days. So this is going to mature in a little bit faster time frame. This is the Calabrese broccoli. So again, lots of different types. There's also, let's see, I think I grabbed, the little Rob broccoli. These are those little mini broccolis that you see in like those fancy restaurants, right? And these mature in 65 days. So a little bit, again, shorter time frame. So pick out some seeds. And the other cool thing about seeds is most packets will tell you about how many seeds you get in the packet. So let's see, this one has here's one. This one's got 45 seeds. So I can grow up to 45 broccoli plants with this one little packet. And so for $3.59, I can grow that much broccoli. So if you got a large space, seeds are a great way to go, but you can also store seeds and use them year after year. The germination might go down slightly, but also when you're talking about seed starting, of course, come in and get some of our Jiffy products. We carry a large supply or a large line of these, whether it's peat pots or greenhouses to start your seeds. A lot of people start them indoors, which is perfectly fine, and then you can go and transplant them. I bring that up with broccoli because it's a good thing to kind of plan and prepare for broccoli, because we want to start them a little bit earlier, and we're typically going to start them inside, and then we're going to take them and transplant them. And when we do that, it's a bit of a process, a little bit more planning. So you want to get a seed starting soil, fill up these little peat pots, and then you can break them off and plant them directly in the ground. But you want to take them outside and get them acclimated in a little bit of shade before we work them out into the full sun area of our vegetable garden. And that's the other thing I didn't mention in the planting portion, is most of your vegetables, especially your cole crops, don't need like crazy sun. Of course, if you can get full sun, that's going to be the best. You're going to get the best results. But a little bit of shade's not going to hurt them either, especially if we're going through a hotter spell in the fall time. A little bit of shade's not going to hurt your spinach or your kale or your collards or your kohlrabi or whatever you might be growing. There's a huge list. I'm not going to go through all of them today. Let's see. I saw a couple questions. Oh dear. So Caroline said, should we start now in seed pots or outside? So because of the soil temperatures in our soil right now, you can probably direct sow. Now, then you got to say with a broccoli, let's say I picked this one, the Calabrese, that's going to be a 60-day to maturity. So we're right around when we're taping this, we're right on about the end of September, third week of September. So we need at least 60 days for it to mature. I think I can get them to germinate in the ground with direct sowing, but I need 60 days for it to come to a full maturity before I can harvest. So that puts us right around the end of November for harvest time, which is pushing it for the frost date, which is really a pretty good time. So I'd say go for it if you're going to do it like really soon, or go ahead and start them in a starter, because they probably will germinate a little bit faster. Start them on top of a refrigerator where you're getting some good warmth. So that's a great place. And then Sharon mentioned starters. Yep, we got starters for most of our plants. And not every single cole crop will have starters for us. So like things like turnips, we don't typically carry starter plants. Carrots, we might talk about. So some of those, we definitely don't sell starters, but that's because they're so easy to grow from seed. So we'll talk about all that as we go along. Do you still have the plants? So Angel, yes, we do. So I've got broccoli, I've got cauliflower, I've got lots of lettuces. I'll show you some of those, but we also have tons and tons of seeds. And it's not too late. Might be for this specific area, you might just have missed broccoli by a little bit, but I'd still say go for it because if we have a later frost time frame, we're gonna be okay. And if it doesn't quite head up, then in the spring it should, especially if it makes it through our winter. So I'd say go for it if you want to. Broccoli and cauliflower are very, very similar in that, but I bring up broccoli just because it's extremely helpful and it's one of my favorites to grow because it's not as hard as maybe Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts take a long time to mature. So that one I probably wouldn't put on my list of the top 5 to get into. Hey, Deborah. All right, so number 4 is gonna be carrots. Carrots are one of my all-time favorites. Super, super easy to grow. They're root vegetables, so we're actually eating the root system of this plant. They germinate fairly quickly, so right around the 7 to 21 day mark. So it could be a pretty quick germination depending on your soil temperature, depending on all of those different things. But also be patient. I've had years where I've planted carrot seeds and it's taken almost all of the 21 days for them to pop up above the soil. But they're pretty easy to grow after that, and they only need about 8 to 10 weeks to harvest, but they can grow through the cooler time frame. So even after a frost, you'll continue to get some growth on your carrots. We wouldn't want them to go through a hard freeze, which typically isn't going to happen for a while here. So we typically don't have to worry about a hard freeze until maybe the month of December. But November, great time to harvest your carrots, and they can actually stay in the ground a fair amount of time. So carrots, a couple different tips and tricks for them. One, kids love them. So if you're trying to get your kids into vegetable gardening, carrots are one of their all-time favorites because they're sweet. They're very, very edible. You can take them right out of the garden, clean them right up, and you've got a nice little healthy snack for them. So they're a lot of fun. A couple things to know is they can take a little bit more time, so 8 to 10 weeks. So keep that in mind when you're planning out your garden. They can germinate quickly, but they could take a little bit more time. Harvest carrots when you start to see, so that's why I put that picture in there, is when you start to see those shoulders, what we call shoulders in your root vegetables, when you start to see the shoulders pop up above the soil level, that's when you pretty much know that they're ready to harvest. Also, carrots are very tough. They can go through pretty tough soil, but if you till or amend your soil, you might have more straight, prettier carrots. They might be a little bit better. They might be a little bit more better tasting because they didn't have to struggle to get down through the soil, which is also why they're a great container plant. Because if you grow them in a straight potting soil, in a potting medium, then the carrots aren't gonna have to fight anything because you got nice loose soil and those carrots are gonna form nice, perfect little shapes. Lots and lots of different types of carrots as well. So they're a great opportunity to get into the vegetable garden. I'm gonna show you some, and the reason I said variety is look at all of these different ones. So many different colors. I love the little baby ones, so you know your little fingerlings, your little tiny carrots are very easy to grow, especially in a smaller container. We've got different colors. So you got the colorful mixes, and these are germinate in 10 to 20 days and then harvest approximately 70 days. So really, really not too bad. Here's a great one. This one's called the Rainbow Blend. So sprouts 7 to 21 days. Again, variable time frame in the germination time frame, but matures in 45 days. So you can get a little bit quicker crop out of this one. So as you look through your seed packets, always look at that. I also grabbed some of these. Now, I don't know if you can quite see this, but this says seed tape up at the top. You see that? So what this is basically a tape that's in here. It's a little band, and you take this out and you just lay it on the ground. You can cut off little pieces. So if you want to do it like in a window box or in a planter box or in a raised bed, you can cut them off, but it puts them at perfectly even spacing. So you don't have to worry about how to space them. Because all of your seed packets are going to tell you your seed depth and your seed spacing, which are important things to know as well. But this kind of takes some of the guesswork out because a lot of these seeds are really tiny. So, I mentioned, how many seeds you get in some of these. In carrots, you get approximately 950 seeds in this packet. So I can go 950 carrots. You can do the scatter method. You can scatter them out. You can put them in a row. Sometimes you might have to do some thinning to make sure that they grow properly. Carrots only need about 2-inch spacing. So pretty easy to kind of get that spaced out, but the seeds are super, super tiny. 950 carrots in this one little packet. for $2.79. So great opportunity to grow lots and lots of carrots. So that's the rainbow blend. Let's see, what else did I grab? I grabbed the circus we show. Let's see. Oh, this is the Royal Chantilly. So this is a really common, just straight carrot. Normal, kind of what you would go and buy in the supermarket, but really, really sweet. And this one matures in about 70 days. So lots and lots of choices with carrots. With carrots, I love growing carrots in containers, as I mentioned, because you've got that nice, super, super soft soil. And this is a great opportunity to tell you about smart pots. Smart pots are really cool. So these are fabric planters. You open them up, you fill them up with soil. And smart pots, what they're designed to do is naturally grow roots very, very well. So if I'm growing just let's say a shrub in this, or a tree, let's say I want to plant a Japanese maple and I really want to develop the root system, smart pots do a great job because when you prune the top of a plant, it gets bigger, right? That's why we typically prune a plant, is typically to make it a little bit fuller, make it a little bit bigger, make it have more vigor. But you can also get the same results on the top of your plant by pruning the roots. Now, to take a plant out of its pot or out of the ground, prune its roots and put it back in is not the best thing for the plant. One, it's a lot of stress on the plant and you're gonna put it into some shock. But especially for like tomatoes and things like that, where we don't want to prune off the top, we just want the top to get bigger, then this will develop root system because it does a little bit of root pruning because it's got great aeration. And what that means is when the roots hit the sidewalls of this planter, they'll dry up, it'll prune them back a little bit, and then they regenerate and they grow and they grow and they get bigger. So great for all of your fall vegetables, but really, really great opportunity for carrots as well. Carrots love these. It's got a nice depth to it, so you can see we've got a good, I don't know, 20, maybe 24 inches of depth here in this pot. This is a 15-gallon pot, but they come in a wide variety of sizes, 3-gallon, 5-gallon, 10-gallon, 15-gallon, and they also come in raised beds as well. So I grabbed a couple of these. This is a new one. This one is a rectangular bed. So this is actually a raised bed right here. It's in that fabric container. It's a really, really cool setup. You just lay it out, fill it up with soil, and go ahead and plant. So if you've always wanted to do a raised bed, but you don't really have the space or the means to kind of do it right now or build one out of wood, then you can always get a smart pot. So Tiffany said, can you grow collards in a smart pot? Yes, for sure. And how many? It depends really on what you're getting. I mean, if you got like a raised bed like this, you could probably grow a fair amount of collards. So this is the round raised bed. But if you're growing in a single pot, collards can get pretty big. Let's see, collard spacing, I did not pick that one. I can show you my little ruler here, which is a great handy tool because it's got all your spacing on here. So let's see, cabbage. I don't know if this is going to have, so I think it's probably right around the cabbage size, maybe a little bit bigger. So I'd say probably right around 18 to 20 inches. So that's kind of your spacing on your collards. So that really does help when planting, is to know your spacing. I don't have a collard package or anything in here to exactly tell you, but I'm pretty sure it's right around that 18 to 20 inch range. So know your container size. If I'm planting in, let's say, this 15-gallon smart pot, I could probably get 3 or 4 collards in here on the very edges, and they're gonna grow perfectly fine because that's a pretty big container right there. So I got this nice big space. I can put one here, one here, one here, one on each corner basically, and I can probably grow up to about 4 collards in this one container. So it depends on the size. So Tiffany, what size? It would really be whatever size it is that you want. In a 3-gallon, 1 collard. In a 5-gallon, maybe 2, we're pushing a little bit. In a 7, probably 2. In a 10, probably right around 3. And a 15-gallon, probably about 4. So it depends on the size of the container, just making sure that you've got enough space on it, really for them to kind of be able to fill out on the top, because we're eating the leafy greens of collards, and so we want to make sure we kind of have enough space on the top. So I see another question. My okra is going crazy over my head. I'm picking the correct smaller size every 3 days. Never grew before. How long will they continue to produce? Well, Caroline, really depends on Mother Nature there, right? So we got to kind of see what Mother Nature does. I think once we start to see these cooler nights come into the area, I know when we're kind of doing this right now, the temperature is going to get down into the 50s a couple nights here real soon. So you'll probably see those start to kind of peter out a little bit once we have those. But keep on picking while they're producing, and then as soon as they kind of stop producing, I would scrap it and go ahead and start on your fall crops if you haven't already. What do you place under so Sharon asked, what do you place under the Smart Pot? You don't have to place anything. If you're placing it on a brick patio or a concrete pad, you don't have to place anything. If you're putting it on the ground, you don't have to do anything. If you're growing it on your deck or porch and you want to protect it, you can put a saucer underneath it. Saucers are only designed to protect things. They're not designed to hold water. So if you get water in them, pick up the Smart Pot, dump out the water, put it back under there. That's just to protect. But only water is going to come out of the bottom of your Smart Pot. So if you're okay with your deck getting water on it, especially if it's out in the rain already, then you're going to be perfectly fine. But if you want to put something under there, a saucer would be fine. Just make sure it's not collecting water because we don't want the roots to sit in water. As your plants get bigger, the biggest kind of tip for Smart Pots is as your plants get bigger, the root system is going to get bigger, which is great. Your plant's going to get bigger. It's probably going to get bigger faster. So you might have to water a little bit more. Now that's the cool thing about our fall crop is cooler weather, don't have to water as frequently. So we're only going to be watering about every probably 4 to 5 days in the fall. So great opportunity to kind of save on the water bill as well. But always, best tool that you got right here on your hand. Check the soil. If it's dry, then go ahead and water. That's the best advice I can give you. And you can also use it by weight, especially with those Smart Pots. You can just pick it up. If it's a little light, go ahead and water it. If it's still heavy, it's still plenty good probably for a while. So just kind of watch your watering. All right, number 3 is going to be radishes. Now radishes, not everybody loves radishes. I think radishes are great. They're spicy, some of them are hot, but some of them are sweet. They're great in salads. They're great as a garnish. They're great just for dipping, and they're really great in some cooking and some recipes as well. They're very, very healthy, and one, or probably the easiest crop or the fastest crop for sure to grow. These from seed can be ready to harvest in as little as 21 days. So 3 weeks you can have radishes. That is just crazy, crazy simple. So really, really cool plant, radishes. As I mentioned, they're really, really healthy. They're great in a lot of different types of dishes and just for easy snacking. So some people don't love the taste, but I love them, and there's lots and lots of different varieties to try as well. Daikon radish have become very, very popular in Chinese recipes and different types of Asian-inspired recipes. So really, really great plant, really, really easy to grow, and huge, huge amount of varieties. I mean, over 200 different varieties in radishes. So you've got a huge selection, very similar to carrots. When that shoulder pops up above the ground, it's ready to harvest. You can also eat the greens on radishes, which is kind of cool. So I love beets. I don't eat as many beets as I used to. My family doesn't like beets as much, but beet greens are really, really good. So some of these root vegetables, you can also eat the greens. Now radishes have a fuzzy texture. Most of them do. If they do have a fuzzy texture and you don't like the texture when you eat just the raw leaf, then cook it. You can cook them in like soups or stir fries. Really, really adds a great little flavor to that. But you can also just eat the radish if you want and put the green tops in your compost pile. But some of the radish greens are not fuzzy and are great in salads, just raw. They're awesome, awesome plants, and they're super, super fast. This is one where I definitely recommend staggering out your harvest time frames, because if you plant 100 radishes, you're going to have 100 radishes in 21 days, because we do want to harvest them. You can leave them in the soil a little bit longer to get a little bit bigger, but if you leave them in too long, they'll get starchy and they'll lose a lot of their flavor. So we definitely want to make sure that we're harvesting those as they are ready. And basically, the best way to know if they're ready to harvest is pull one out, or to go and look and make sure their shoulders are popping up out of the ground. And once they're up above the ground and exposed a little bit, then you know that you're ready to kind of harvest those. You can also pull away the soil just a little bit off the top just to kind of see how they're doing, especially with carrots and radishes and any of your kind of root vegetables, turnips, beets, all of those that are kind of developing under the soil and you want to check, just pull a little bit of the soil away around one of them and see how it's doing, and then push the soil right back up. You don't have to tug them out and try and replant them. It's not going to usually work very well. So just kind of check them, and then you can just push the soil right back over top of them and you'll know how they're doing. But also look at your seed packets, right? So radishes, typically you're not going to get in a starter plant. You're almost always going to grow them from seeds, but they're so easy. 5 to 10 days for a germination time frame. So 5 to 10 days and then 25 days to mature. So I can get these in 30 days. So I've got a great time frame to do the cherry bells. Huge amount of varieties, just tons and tons of varieties. The sparkler, I only grabbed a few. Sparkler radish, cherry bell radish. This is on that seed tape as well. So this is a really, really easy way to kind of, again, get that spacing right, because radishes are right about, for a row is about 12 inches. For plants, it's about 2 inches, kind of similar to carrots. So right around 2 inches. So a lot of people, these are very, very fine seeds. So let's see, how many seeds do I have? So I got 95 seeds in here. These are actually a little bit easier seeds to, sorry, I was thinking carrots. Carrots are very, very fine seeds, but this one has 80 seeds in it. So again, a lot of seeds, a little bit bigger, a little bit easier to plant at that proper spacing. The seed tape helps. Watermelon radish, really cool one. The rainbow blend, one of my favorites because you get lots of different types of them in there. And then the French breakfast, that kind of longer, cool looking radish. So really, really fun, easy one to grow. So I see we got an answer for somebody else, so great. So radishes are a great one, very, very easy to grow. They also have been known to repel some insects. Typically more of your summer insects, so like squash bugs and different types of things like that, cucumber beetles, lots of those, the radishes have naturally been able to repel. But I always like in the fall vegetable garden to talk about repelling animals, because a lot of time those rabbits, if you've got rabbits in your area, rabbits love to munch on lettuce and carrots and pull things up out of the ground. And if you got moles and voles and different things like that, we can talk about all that in the future. But really kind of just to bring it kind of to your attention, and again, to kind of think about that planning stage. If we're trying to repel animals out of our vegetable garden, you can put up a structure to try and keep them out, but rabbits, birds, squirrels, they always tend to find a way in, right? So using an organic repellent is a great option. So this is IMS Garden's animal repellent. It's completely natural, all natural, and it's great for deer, rabbits, groundhogs, and other herbivores. So other animals that are eating leafy greens, vegetables, out of your vegetable garden, this is a great opportunity to repel them naturally. It's basically got garlic, white pepper, peppermint oil, lemongrass oil, so it's all natural ingredients. You sprinkle it right around the garden, you can sprinkle it through the garden. It's not going to hurt your plants at all, and it's a great natural way, and it's a granular too, so it's got this nice little shaker top. You just shake it around the garden, make a perimeter. That'll keep your animals out of your vegetable garden so that you can be more successful. Also, I mentioned, the harvest time frame. So, such a quick harvest, then we need to know when we need to harvest, and also when we planted or when we got the seeds to germinate. So I always recommend picking up some of these. You can use popsicle sticks, but just a little plant marker. These are like the little cheapy ones, plastic or wood, that you can write on, and you get a lot of them in here. So I think it's like a 50 pack or a 24 pack, depending on what you get, or depending on what size you want. But I think it's really important, especially if you're doing a little bit of a larger vegetable garden, or you're doing kind of a succession plan, so we're kind of staggering out our harvest, to kind of write on there, planted or seeded at this date, and then harvest time frame, estimate your date, right around looking at your seed packet. So let's say I plant these cherry bells, then I'm gonna say, okay, I planted them on September 22nd, and harvest time would be 30 days. So we'd say right around October 22nd, harvest time frame. So that way on my plant marker, I know what I need to do, and it can kind of help me kind of organize and plan out my garden. So when I go out to the garden, I know what I need to check on and what I need to harvest. So great way to kind of help make a plan, but also use some plant markers, because it really will help you as you go through, especially if you're doing different types or different harvest time frames. Caroline said, I plant in a community garden that has lots of pre-existing grass. What way to keep down the grass around the fall veggies, or will cool weather keep it down? So Caroline, yes, the cool weather will help some. There are lots of other weeds that grow and other types of grasses that will grow in cooler weather, so that is going to happen. We're going to experience some cooler weather, and something else is going to grow. Trust me, if there's bare ground and you're trying to keep it bare ground, something's going to want to grow into it. But we do have some organic solutions that will kill them. Hand pulling, of course, is probably the best organic solution, but you can use some of the organic sprays. We have those as well, so you can spray. We got them a little ready to use. I don't have one to show you, but we do carry those as well. It's called Natural Guard. Non-selective weed killer. It's completely organic, completely safe. So you can spray your weeds and your grasses to kind of keep them at bay. Also, I haven't mentioned, I didn't even think about it, I didn't even make a note about this, but I love to mulch my vegetable garden. Whether it's the summer vegetable garden or the fall vegetable garden. Mulch really helps keep weeds and grasses out. So that's a great opportunity to use a little bit of mulch. It could be pine straw. It could be, I don't love wheat straw. Wheat straw tends to grow wheat. But I love pine straw or hardwood mulches or any of those. It's a great way to kind of keep the moisture in, makes the garden look nice, and keeps your plants nice and organized and clean too from the dirt. When we have heavy rains, the dirt splashes up and they're all over the leaves. You're going to clean them anyways, but it kind of keeps them a little bit cleaner if you want to go out and pick and just have a little snack as well. So Caroline, great question. All right, so let's see. I think I covered everything on radishes. Spinach is my number 2. Now, spinach is one of the first things I definitely grew, and I absolutely loved it. I wasn't a huge spinach fan until I grew my own, because once you grow your own, it's probably the only way you'll like spinach again. It just has a different kind of buttery taste. It's super, super easy, very, very simple to grow. Harvest from the outside. So you can see this plant up here in the top right-hand corner. So there's your kind of full-grown spinach plant. You know, as it's, I shouldn't say there's really not a mature time frame, because you're going to keep on eating on spinach. That's why I love spinach, is because once you get it to germinate, once you're growing it, you can start harvesting it. And all you're going to do is pick out all the leaves on the outer edges. And so you can see up there that full plant, you can go and start picking off some of those bigger leaves. Leave about 2 or 3 leaves in the center, and it'll just keep on producing from the center. And that's why I love spinach, is because it's bountiful throughout the entire season. And it really makes it pretty well throughout our winter season. Might not grow as much. So if you start to see, like, okay, we get into the December, January time frame, and I see, okay, it's going to be in, like, you know, the low 30s, 20s for a week. Leave the leaves on there, because they're going to need them to survive. You don't want to go and pick them all off and have no leaves there. But once we start to warm up again, if we get a warm week, all of a sudden, you'll start to see those new leaves emerge. Go and pick the other ones off, and you'll have a great snack, and you'll be able to plant a lot of spinach. It's super, super easy. And it is, of course, one of our superfoods. Tons and tons of vitamins, loaded, great with cooking. You can cook with it. It's great in a fresh salad, great on sandwiches. Spinach is amazing, 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 and it is one of the most successful things that you can do. It's super, super easy, and I just love to grow spinach because it's very, very easy. Very easy to grow from seed as well. You know, I didn't actually have a seed starter pack in spinach, so that might be one thing that we are out of. But spinach, very easy to grow from seed. 5 to 10 days, mature in about 40 days. And I say mature, but that really means, I mean, you're really picking from these probably around the 2 to 3 week time frame. So, you know, give it about, 24 to 30 days, and you can start to pick. Once you get to about that 40-day time frame, you're really picking. And so these are great. This one is called Olympia, so a little bit of a larger spinach leaf. You can kind of see it's almost got an arrowhead shape. Viking spinach, this is on that seed tape again. So you can see that seed tape, and that means it'll be kind of spaced out perfectly. We've also got the Bloomsdale, which is one of probably the most popular varieties, is Bloomsdale. So Bloomsdale has 42 days of maturity, sprouts in 5 to 10 days. Very easy. Spacing on spinach is right around 6 to 8 inches, somewhere in that range. You can probably get them as close as 4 inches. You can grow these in bowls too, so you can just get a nice little clay terracotta bowl and grow them right in there. So this is baby leaf spinach. Speaking of growing in a bowl, there you go. You can grow this one right in a little bowl, and you've got yourself a nice salad bowl that you can grow on your deck or porch or patio as well. And then I grabbed the baby leaf spinach, the Catalina. This is a really, really nice one too. Spinach are super, super easy to grow. They're very, very healthy. And if you're gonna try one fall vegetable, I would probably try spinach, although my next one I might say is really my top one. It'll be my number 1. So it's definitely my favorite. But with spinach, I wanted to talk about a couple things, which is feeding our plants. So I haven't mentioned feeding it yet. Whenever I plant anything new, whether it's from a seed or from a starter plant, so I use Biotone Starter. Biotone Starter is a beneficial bacteria-loaded starter fertilizer. So it's basically your starter plant food. It's completely organic, but it's got all of these beneficial microorganisms. Bacteria mycorrhizae is what we typically call them, but there's a lot of other beneficial bacteria other than mycorrhizae. But these are, it's got tons and tons of them. It goes right to the root system, and it expands your root system very quickly. They basically form a symbiotic relationship with your plant for the entirety of its life. They give what they don't need, and they take what the plant doesn't need. So it's a great relationship, and it works really, really well, and you're gonna see your plants grow very, very quickly and have a lot of vigor and a lot of bountiness when you're planting your fall vegetables, spring vegetables, anything. Every single thing that I put in the ground, I put this on there now. So great opportunity to use this even when you're seeding. So what you would do is you would just put it down kind of underneath your seed. As your seed germinates, it'll be there available for them. If you're starting from starter plants, then you plant it right around the root system as well. So it gets right to the root system and starts working fast. But I also want to talk about what are we feeding a lot of our cole crops. So it really depends on, you can get super specific, so it depends on kind of what you're planting. A great organic solution is Garden Tone. Garden Tone is a good one because it's an all-purpose kind of garden fertilizer. It's a 3-4-4, it's very light, it's organic, it's safe, it's kind of a well-balanced diet. It's got calcium, which is usually pretty good for a lot of vegetables. Really good one that you can use is Espoma's Organic Garden Tone, kind of an all-purpose plant food. And typically I like all-purpose plant foods for my cole crops, especially my leafy greens. Now I love green leaf. Green leaf is something that I always have in my garage or my shed because it's what I use in all of my landscape plants. But this is a great one because it's a little bit higher in nitrogen. So a 3-4-4, pretty low in nitrogen, only 3%. But this is a 12-4-8, so it's much higher in nitrogen. Now, it's a traditional formula. We do also carry it in an organic formula as well, which is great because for organics, you don't typically get a huge nitrogen content, but this one is an 8. So this one's an 8-2-4, and that's pretty high for nitrogen in an organic plant food. So we've got our organic green leaf, we've got our traditional green leaf, both are great. And the reason I talk about nitrogen is what gives you green growth. And when we're growing spinach or lettuce or kale or collards, we want green growth, right? So that's what we got to push is a little bit more nitrogen to kind of help that. Now, if we're growing carrots and radishes and different things like that, the green growth helps keep the plant vigorous and tall and big. But we also might want some more phosphorus. So that's where I kind of like to have both Garden Tone and green leaf and Biotone. Add Biotone first, you're covered for about the first probably 2 to 3 weeks, and then you're gonna come in with your green leaf or your Garden Tone to kind of feed throughout the season. We're gonna keep on picking from the plants. The plants are producing, and because we're picking from the plants, we need them to keep producing, and therefore we need to make sure that we're feeding them as well. Let's see, Sharon said all of my favorites are so easy, so great. Sarah said, if you don't have room to start seed indoors, would a greenhouse be okay? Yeah, for sure, Sarah. It's all about temperature. So, typically most of your cole crops can actually germinate in a fairly cooler temperature. So probably right around, we want to be probably above 70 degrees. We want to keep our soil temperature around that. You can get heating mats. So if you have an outdoor greenhouse or even in your garage or in a shed, but yes, a greenhouse would be a great option. Take one of those small little covered greenhouses and you can start your seeds right in there. Watch those cold nights. So, if we're gonna have a cold night, then you might wanna bring them in if you're starting your seeds and just bring them in for just that one night and then take them back out and put them in the greenhouse. The greenhouse, of course, is designed to ramp up the heat indoors because you got that plastic covering. So it's intensifying the heat, intensifying the sun, and therefore upping the heat, but the temperatures could fall fairly quickly at night, and if they do, that greenhouse, if it's not heated, will fall as well. So we don't want to give it big fluctuations in temperatures. We want to keep it somewhat in a nice kind of average, but heat will make them germinate faster for sure, but we want the heat to go away once they do germinate to keep the plants kind of thriving. All of these cool crops or cold crops or cole crops is really what they're called, really like our temperatures right around the 50s to 70s, 50s at night, 70s in the day. Those are kind of the ideal temperatures, and we'll be above them and we'll be below them, and it'll be okay. They'll do perfectly fine. But as far as starting seeds, yes, a greenhouse would be perfectly fine. All right, my number one is going to be lettuce, of course. Lettuce was another thing that I grew. The first vegetable garden I grew, I did do some broccoli and I did a couple other things, but I did spinach and lettuce predominantly because I knew that my family would eat them. I knew that I would eat them. It's a great starting point. It's a very easy one to start with. And lettuces, huge amount of variety as well. And we all really like lettuce, right? I mean, lettuce goes on salads. It goes on our sandwiches. You can use it to cook with. You can use it as a, just kind of to make something pretty on a plate, so lots for garnishment. So lots and lots of uses of lettuce. But also I will say, you will never have tasted lettuce until it comes from your own garden. It is one of the best tastes. It's kind of a buttery kind of taste, as I mentioned with the spinach. It's just a smoother, kind of easy to eat lettuce. It's not hard, it's not bitter, it's super, super simple, and it's very, very easy, and there's a great selection of varieties. You can get some spicy mixes, which add a little bit of like that arugula kind of flavoring into it, but you can also get a blend that just has your butter crunch or your red sails, which are two of my favorites, but they're really, really, really easy to grow, and most of them continue to produce. And that's really what I'm going to talk about today, is some of my favorites that produce consistently throughout the year, which is why I love lettuce. Now there are heading lettuces, so I grabbed a bunch of packets because this is my number one. So Great Lakes Iceberg Lettuce. So this is kind of a cool one because I've grown this a couple different ways. I've grown it to head up. So whenever I talk about heading up, that's kind of like the cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprout world, but it also happens with cabbages and lettuces that get a head on them. So you can see that image right there. Like you think when you go into the supermarket and you buy an iceberg head of lettuce. That is what your plant needs to do. Therefore, it takes a little bit longer to kind of do that. So that's why on this packet it says matures in 85 days. However, I have grown this exact lettuce, the Great Lakes Iceberg Lettuce. I've grown this before and just done like I typically do with the typical lettuce and just picked the outer part of the leaves off. It just kept on producing. Really, really awesome. If you get into like a warmer season, this is where I'll talk about bugs a little bit, because I know I've grown lettuce a lot of times and bugs can be a problem. So we're talking about aphids and a couple other things, and of course the cabbage moths. So all of those things can get in there. And we'll talk about that here in a minute. And this one does tend to kind of curl over because it wants to form that head, and I kept on picking the leaves. So it creates kind of a pocket for these insects to get into and kind of be protected and kind of be able to eat away. And the problem with it is they'll eat out the crown of it, and if the middle part of the plant isn't producing anymore, it's not going to produce any more leaves for you. So, but this is a great one. There's a lot of them in here. So this is a salad bowl lettuce, and it comes on that seed tape. So you can always get these seed tapes in pretty much everything I've talked about today. This is a really great one. This is a salad blend lettuce. So it's basically, I think, red sails and butter crunch or Paris Island. So really, really nice one. Got lots of seeds in it, approximately 1,600 seeds, 1,600 seeds in this little packet. So I can grow a ton of lettuce for $2.09. So you can do this a lot of different ways. You can plan to maybe harvest it and just chop it right off and just take the whole bunch in. So here you go. Here would be kind of, a Simpson Elite lettuce. So you just go in and chop this off and eat it up, and you probably won't get any more producing, or you can be kind of specific and go around and pick everything. And as you pick, you'll get more leaves coming out of the center. So really, really nice one is that salad blend lettuce. Let's see, what else do I got? I got the salad bowl red. So this is probably that red sails, which is one of my favorite lettuces to grow, which is this one right here. Look at that, just awesome. Great color, really, really great to fresh eat. One of my favorites of all time. This is our baby greens. So this is the cut and come again, which is basically what we're talking about. A little bit of a mix, very similar to this guy right here. So you can see all those mixes and different colors. So you can get this in a cell pack like this, where you can start and plant it right away, or you can grow it from seed because it's super, super easy. I didn't mention germination time frame, somewhere around 7 to 14 days. And then really, harvest again is kind of vague. It says 40 days, that's when it's gonna really start producing. But here in this area, you can really kind of get it through the entire winter season. Like I said, don't pick it if it's not gonna grow. Don't pick it down to one leaf and then let it go through a 2-week period of being in the low 30s, high 20s. Then it's not gonna grow as much, and it's gonna struggle only having one leaf to survive on. Plants need their leaves to survive. But you can also mulch it, which keeps the warmth in a little bit, and it helps it kind of kick out of that kind of dormant period when it gets really cold. And so as soon as we get a nice warm week, it'll start growing again, and you can start picking again. But that's why I love them, is you can keep on picking. Butter crunch, absolutely awesome. If you're gonna do one lettuce, it would probably be this one. It would be my recommendation. It takes a little bit longer to mature, about 65 days, but it germinates pretty quick in about 7 to 10. And it's just an amazing, amazing buttery kind of taste. Awesome, awesome one. This is the Marvel of 4 Seasons. So just another variety. I've never tried that one. And then I threw in arugula. Now arugula could probably be by itself in a different one, but I like to throw a little arugula in my salad mix. So I've got a couple raised beds or up on table beds that I love to do salads in, because they don't need a whole big depth amount of soil. So I don't need a super, super deep amount of soil. These have about 4 or 5 inches of soil, and I just spread my lettuce across them, and I can kind of scatter it. So it's kind of my scatter method. And I'll always scatter a little arugula in there for a little spicy mix in there as well. Jessica said, or Sharon said, the red lettuce is nice. I love it. It is super easy, and it's one of my favorite tasting lettuces. Jessica said, are there any companion plants or non-companions? So there's not really any non-companions when it comes to cole crops. I think they're all pretty much companions. Obviously, watch your spacing on some of them. Some of the plants get big. So let's say, some of the things that I didn't talk about, mustard greens. Mustard greens get huge, big plants. So mustard greens are going to need about 20, 24 inches of space around it. Now, if you're planting, let's say like we mentioned earlier, like collards in a container. Well, collards typically get tall, and so they kind of grow like, you see this like dinosaur kale behind me? This is an ornamental one, but this is kind of what your collards and kale will look like. So they get kind of big and they're tall, and so you can underplant it with like a spinach. It's a great option. Lots and lots of different things to do as far as companion planting goes. And there aren't anything that I would say don't plant together other than just watch your spacing. That's the most important thing about it, is always your spacing. Carrots, especially when you're talking about root vegetables too. Carrots, beets, turnips, parsnips, things like that need some soil capacity and need that spacing to grow that root system, because that's what we're eating. So that's kind of the most important thing, is to kind of know about that. What is the lettuce at your left elbow? This one? So this is the Simpson Elite, which is just kind of that light lime green lettuce. Let's see what else I grabbed. This is the Butter Crunch. Butter Crunch, my all-time favorite. This is that Red Sales, I believe. Yep, Red Sales. Really nice one. This is a mixture, so this has some romaine, some red sales, a couple other, it looks like it's mostly romaine and some red sales, and this is my broccoli that I showed you. But typically we carry lettuces a fair amount. This is the other one that I didn't show. This is the mesclun mix. So that's a mix of different lettuces. So that's gonna have a little bit of spice in it as well. But lettuce is super, super easy. So a couple tips and tricks for lettuce is the insects. Or let's say I got one more question. I put 4 Georgia collards in a 15-gallon grow bag. Will they be okay? Yeah, definitely. As long as they've got the space on them. So, you kind of put them in the farthest kind of portions of the container. I think you'll be perfectly fine. And if you start to see one struggling, or if you feel like they're just not producing well for you, then you might have to pull 1 or 2. You can also transplant them into another container if you've got space. So great question, but I think you're going to be okay with 4 collards in a 15-gallon container. As long as they're not all 4 right in the center, you might have issues there. Does your Great Neck location have all of these plants and seeds? They definitely have all the seeds. Plants are limited, I will say, but I really recommend just kind of coming in and look. Yes, we have some plants. We don't have everything in plant. So I don't have carrots, I don't have beets, I don't have turnips. I do have some kohlrabi, some cauliflower, broccoli. I don't think I saw spinach, but I definitely have lettuces. So we've got a lot of those. Did Anita mean the big one next to the yellow plant? That is a great question. So Sharon, that might be what she was talking about. We just brought this. This is ornamental. This is an ornamental kale. Kind of looks like a cabbage, right? But this is just a pretty plant. You can eat it. It's not going to hurt you. It's just not the best tasting in the world. These, as the winter goes on, this is what we plant in our landscape or in a container. These, as the winter gets colder, actually brighten up. So this center right here is going to turn bright, bright pink. So really, really nice ornamental plant. So not edible. You could eat it. It's not going to hurt you, but you're not going to love the taste. So great question. That might have been what she was talking about. So we just brought these in for decoration, but these are your edible ones. And of course, huge selection in seeds. And seeds are pretty easy to germinate. You can still direct sow almost all of these. I mean, our soil temperature is not going to fall for a while, so you've got plenty of time to direct sow all of your seeds and get them going, and just kind of do a little bit of planning. Like I mentioned, do a little bit of planning, come in, talk to us, meet with us. As I mentioned before we got started, we do some seminars, so check out our website at mcdonaldgardencenter.com to see if we've got any upcoming seminars on any of these topics. But with lettuce and collards and kale and cabbages and broccoli and cauliflower, all of those can have some issues with cabbage moths. So I wanted to talk about that real quick, because that brings in dipel dust. Dipel dust, old-fashioned, right? You've seen the plants with all the dust on them. So So this is a puffer tube that you can puff out your dust on. You also carry it in bags. I like to get one of these and one of these so I can refill this with this. So really, really easy way to do it. But dipel dust is BT, Bacillus thuringiensis, and that is a beneficial bacteria that kills worms, caterpillars, not earthworms, so you don't have to worry about that. But this is basically going to be a great way to ward off those things. I actually like the dust. We make a liquid. They make a liquid now. Liquids are easy because you can just spray it. The problem is the dust you can see. So after a rain, if it's a light rain and there's still dust on there, then you know you're fine. You don't have to do it again. But after a heavy rain and there's no more dust on the leaves, then you got to go back out and dust them, especially when we're warm. So typically when our temperatures are somewhere in that kind of 90 to 70 range, then you're going to see cabbage moths. And cabbage moths are those little white to kind of soft yellow fluttering butterflies that everybody says, oh, they're so cute. Well, the problem with them is they lay their larvae, they lay their eggs on these leafy greens, and they hatch into a little green worm that almost always is on the underside of the leaf of your cabbage or your broccoli or whatever it might be, and they're very difficult to find and very difficult to see, and a lot of times they're small and they'll get down into the crown of the plant and they'll get right down in there and they'll eat out the center, and once the center stops producing, as I mentioned on a lot of these plants, they're kind of done. So we want to make sure we're dusting, especially early in the season. As we get cooler, once the night temperatures get down to that 50, 40 degree range, you're going to see a lot less cabbage moth damage. But you could still see them. And then with, as I mentioned, with like that Great Lakes iceberg lettuce, some of these plants are kind of protective for insects. And so it's a good thing to kind of have a couple different organic solutions as well. So I love these. This is our Natural Guard neem oil and then our spinosad soap. So these are great options. This is a great insecticidal soap as well as spinosad, which is a great option to organically kill a lot of those things. You know, so if you've got aphids or mealybug or any of those in there, then I definitely would recommend something like this. Neem oil actually has a little bit of bacterial. So basically it's a neem oil, so it coats the plant and is going to protect it. And so kind of choke out any of those insects or diseases. You might have to apply multiple times with neem oil to really eradicate a problem. But spinosad soap is a little bit easier to use. And if you have a specific kind of bacterial issue, fungus, then this is a great option as well as this complete disease control. This is completely organic, very, very safe, OMRI listed, made by Monterey. It's a great option to kind of help if you get any of those funguses, which typically don't occur unless we're watering the leaves. Let's try not to water the leaves of our plants. All of our vegetable plants take water in through the root system. Now, rain is one thing, but when we're watering, we want to make sure we're watering the root system. And I got a couple tools for that. And of course, my number one tool is this Dram watering wand. It's the only way that I water anymore. I never use anything else. It's great because it's got an on-off valve, so I can kind of control the water flow, but it's also got this breaker up at the top, which really helps break the water so it's not gushing and moving soil all over the place. It helps my back because I can get right down to the roots of the plants. I don't have to water over top of the plant. I can water right to the plant. So it's a great little tool, the Dram watering wand. And there's nothing worse than dealing with a heavy, hose that has tons of kinks in it. So if you are looking for a new hose or in the market for a new hose, this is the only hose that we use now here at the Garden Center. ZeroG is absolutely awesome. It's lightweight, it doesn't kink, and it's very, very durable. It's one of my favorite hoses. So ZeroG hose and a Dram watering wand will make your watering life a lot easier, especially if we have a dry time in the fall season. So Angel said, is the toddler and pet safe? So yes, Bacillus thuringiensis, BT, dipel dust, completely safe. It's a beneficial bacteria. It doesn't hurt anything other than caterpillars. So it's a really, really safe product. Not going to hurt anybody else. Definitely if you're applying it by hand, wash your hands, use gloves, things like that. But all of our organic solutions, spinosad soap, neem oil, going to be completely safe with pets and animals and kids. So definitely don't have to worry about that. Can kale be grown in the fall? Yes. So kale did not make my list. And that's not because it's not easy to grow. It is. Kales and collards are very easy to grow. But so let me see if I can list off a bunch of cole crops, things that you can plant in the fall. So beets, turnips, carrots, radishes, mentioned a bunch of those, kohlrabi, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, lettuce, spinach, kale, collards, parsnips. I mean, there's more than probably that. So there's a huge list of things that you can plant. I just said kind of my top 5. maybe not easiest, all of them. Broccoli might not be like the easiest thing to grow. Carrots take a little bit of time to germinate, so you got to be a little bit patient. Radishes are super fast. Spinach and lettuce is very easy and very successful, but these are kind of our top 5 that I think will get you really invigorated into doing a fall garden. So hopefully that kind of helps answer that question, but the list is huge. You know, I've never really grown kohlrabi because I don't really eat it. Pak choi, you know, again, another one that I've grown. I've actually grown that one, but I don't really use it in a lot of my cooking, so that's kind of that planting stage. But pak choi is a good one. I didn't mention that. Kohlrabi. Swiss chard. Swiss chard is awesome. I love Swiss chard. I almost always grow Swiss chard, but it's just not in my top 5. It'd be in my top 10 for sure. So lots and lots of options, lots of things to choose from. Didn't go through all of them today, but went through the top 5. So these would be my suggestions if you're just getting into a vegetable garden or you've never grown any of these 5. You should try them because I think you'll love them, and they're great options. So I think I kind of touched on all of my little, the last thing I wanted to show you is get a pair of small pruners. This will save you so much time. So these are just a nice little tiny kind of pointed pruner. You can use scissors, you can use different things, but you're gonna find yourself going in and picking these plants a lot, and it's real easy when you have a nice little pair of pruners instead of like my big kind of, you know, handheld shrub pruner. So this I'm gonna go out and prune like limbs and shrubs, but on a plant like this, it's gonna be hard to use these big kind of clunky things. So I love to get a small pair of pruners that I can get in there and get real precise, and I can just go around and clip, and then I've got my lettuce that I can just go pick up off the ground, and I can eat this, wash it off, and I'm ready to make a salad. So, and that will continue to increase the vigor of the plant because we're taking off leaves that they're putting energy into. So they're taking and putting all this energy into these leaves that you should be harvesting. If you harvest them, then you'll get more leaves. And the best way to make an easy harvest is to have the right tools. So hopefully that helps. I think I've mentioned pretty much all of my little things and tips and tricks. So I hope you all enjoyed this. I think I got all the questions as I went through. So I'll kind of double check real quick. Thank you, Caroline, saying this is a great program. Oh, and you said, how do we measure soil temperature? So the best way, and we're lucky, and Caroline, assuming that you live, and I think you mentioned you live in the Chesapeake area, but if we live in Hampton Roads, you can always check the Hampton Roads Bay temperature. Not the Chesapeake Bay, the Hampton Roads Bay. If you check the Hampton Roads Bay temperature, our temperature is going to be about 2 to 3 degrees warmer, typically. So you can always kind of check, let's say it says it's 68 degrees, then our soil temperature is going to be right around 70, 71. So it just depends on what that water temperature is. It really kind of is very even to that. It's a great way to check. You can buy a soil temperature. I don't typically recommend it. You can look on websites. I'm sure there's websites out there that tell you what the soil temperature is on average, but I always like to look at what the Hampton Roads Bay temperature is. Once I see that, not the Chesapeake Bay, the Hampton Roads Bay, once I see that water temperature, I know that we're going to be right in about a 2 to 3 degree range of that for our soil temperature. So when our Hampton Roads Bay becomes about 50 degrees, or 40 degrees, which very rarely ever gets to, then you know our soil temperature is going to be right in that range too, or just a little bit above that. So hopefully that helps you, Caroline. I didn't see that question, so I'm glad I went back and checked. So I've seen that in someone's garden and the center was purplish. Yep, Sharon, so this bigger kind of kale, this ornamental kale, they make some that have white centers, some that have purple, some that have pink. So lots and lots of different options, but they really need cold weather to really kind of color up. So once we get that, we'll start to see all the color. I think everything else I got to, so I'm gonna assume that I did. All right, everybody. Well, let's see, let me scroll back down to the bottom. So let's see, Shada said, do I need to cover my carrot seeds to keep them from being washed away? They are in a grow pot. You shouldn't need to. So if they're in a container, then you know, when you water them gently is the best thing I can advise. That's why I love this guy, because I can control the flow of the water. You can use a small watering can. The best thing to do is just kind of water them gently, but you should be fine. You should not see them kind of float away or move too much on you. And you can always bury them a little bit. So carrot seeds, let's just check, just so I don't tell you something that's not So it's 1/4 of an inch. So we're talking about a dusting of soil over the top. If you went to 1/2 inch because you're worried about them moving a little bit, then you could be fine with 1/2 inch most likely. It might set your germination back just a little bit more because again, it's that temperature. The temperature is going to be higher on the top of the pot than it is on the bottom of the pot. But just be careful about how you water, and that should help keep your kind of, the moisture level correct. And when watering, water lightly, a little less often, or a little more often, or if you're watering a larger garden, water deep less often. It's kind of the vice versa, so we're gonna water deep less often on established plants, but on seeds, we're gonna water probably a little bit more often, but we want them to go dry. So we want them to be moist during the day, dry at night. Your seeds, the dampness and darkness can cause fungus and issues, and you want that seed to dry out a little bit. We don't want it to contract all the way, but how seed coatings break down, I always like to explain this, is when you water, the seed expands and absorbs that moisture. And then as it dries, it contracts. And then when it contracts, it helps break down that seed coating. So we want it to contract some. We don't want it to contract all the way where it dries up and it won't absorb any more water. But once you start watering it, it'll start that expansion contraction time frame. So we want to do kind of a little bit of a wet dry. Water it during the day, let it dry out at night. It also gets you into a good kind of watering regime, which means that you'll water during the morning and not at night because dampness and darkness cause fungus. So Shada said, I've been misting them, but we have a storm coming. Yeah, so if it's in a container, great point. If it's in a container that you can move, then yes, I would move them to get them away from getting that, that big heavy storm that comes through. If you can't, then yes, covering them would be perfectly fine. If you can get like a plank of wood or something just to cover the top, if nothing's germinated yet. If they have germinated, they'll probably survive it perfectly fine, even if they're just tiny little sprouts. But if they haven't, if you're still trying to get your seed to germinate, then maybe during a heavy storm, I probably would kind of cover it if you can't move the pot indoors or into a garage or shed or into a covering. But then I would take something and try and cover it. I wouldn't use like a sheet or something. It needs to be something kind of durable because you're right, it could be a heavy storm. So great questions, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed this. I hope you all learned something. If you've got any more questions, of course, come on in. Feel free to ask our garden experts. We've been in Hampton Roads for almost 75 years, over 75 years now. So come and ask us questions. That's what we're here for. Enjoy your fall garden. I think you will love it. Lots and lots of seeds to choose from, lots of plants to choose from, lots of different things that you can get into. But you'll be very, very successful if you try some of these 5 vegetables that you can plant in the fall season and harvest away, and it'll be a lot of fun. Great for kids, great for people of all ages. You can do them in containers, raised beds, rows. You can make a big farm. You can do it whatever you want. It's a great opportunity to get into the garden and to grow your own food. So everybody, have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you here in the garden center soon. Bye, everybody.